Good evening and welcome to our Youghal Baptist Church Carol Service for 2020. In the lineup for this evening we have a couple of carols, some readings read to us by the members of Youghal Baptist Church, and I'll give a short message on Jesus, the light of the world. As I'll say at the end of the programme, if anyone would like a gospel or a Bible or maybe a calendar for next year, do get in contact with us. We'd love to get you one so that you too can have the very words of Jesus and read them for yourselves and have that light of Christ in your heart this Christmas. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future he will honour Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan.
The people walking in darkness have seen a great light, and those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned.
You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder.
For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressors.
Every warrior's boot used in battle, and every garment rolled in blood, will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire.
For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace.
The domination will be vast, and its prosperity will never end. He will reign on the throne of David, and over his kingdom, to establish and sustain it. With justice and righteousness from now on and forever, the zeal of the Lord of armies will accomplish this.
Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all you nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With angelic host proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Christ by highest heaven adored, Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time, behold him come, offspring of a virgin's womb. Veiled in flesh the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity. Pleased as man with man to dwell, Jesus our Emmanuel. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Hail the heaven-born Prince of Peace, hail the Son of Righteousness. Light and life to all he brings, risen with healing in his wings. Mighty lays his glory by, born that men no more may die, born to raise the sons of earth, born to give them second birth. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
He was with God in the beginning.
Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made.
In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind.
The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it.
There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John.
He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe.
He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light.
The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world.
He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him.
He came to those who were his own, but his own did not receive him.
Yet to those who received him and those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God.
Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God.
The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
The first Noel, the angel did say, was to certain poor shepherds in fields as they lay, in fields where they lay keeping their sheep on a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. They looked up and saw a star shining in the east beyond them far, and to the earth it gave great light, and so it continued both day and night. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel, and by the light of that same star, 3 wise men came from country far to see for a king was their intent, and to follow the star where'er it went. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Then entered in those wise men 3, full reverently upon their knee, and offered them in his presence their gold and myrrh and frankincense. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Then let us all with one accord sing praises to the heavenly Lord, who had made heaven and earth at naught, and with his blood mankind hath bought. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel.
I remember back in springtime of this year when we first went into lockdown, I was grateful for the time of year that it was spring. I didn't like the thought of having a lockdown in any of the December or November nights, the winter months. But here we are, and possibly with another big, more severe lockdown just around the corner in January, but it certainly hasn't been as bad as I thought it might be. That's just me. Maybe you had different expectations, but I know for myself and my little family, we've probably been at the beach more in the last 6 months than we have the entire previous time that we've lived in Youghal over the 5 or 6 years. Perhaps this year more than ever, we've felt the need for a little more sunlight, or even a little more light of any kind for that matter. We put up the Christmas tree a month earlier than we normally do, and I even hung some fairy lights outside, went the extra step. It's certainly not going to compensate for the 6 hours less sunlight that we get this time of year, but it only takes the tiniest, little, faintest of lights to dispel the darkness, doesn't it? In the Gospel according to St. John, which we just heard from, John describes Jesus as the light. In the very opening lines of his Gospel, John writes, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind." John is introducing Jesus to us, and he calls Jesus the Word and the Light. And with both terms, John is explaining to us that Jesus is the very revelation of God himself. Jesus is God's very character, both audibly, the Word, and visibly, the light. Even in our simple day-to-day lives, our words reveal us, don't they? As Jesus says, the mouth speaks out of the overflow of the heart. I know myself that I might try and keep my feelings to myself, but my choice of words or my tone of voice, well, those things betray my true feelings, don't they? They reveal what's in my heart. Jesus, as God's Word in the flesh, reveals God's very character to us. His words speaking into the darkness at the very beginning of creation, saying, "Let there be light," and there was light. John goes on to explain that the Word, the light of God, Jesus, has been shining into human hearts from the very beginning, from creation, from that point. In each of our lives, God has been giving us some light. Growing up, I listened to a lot of Simon and Garfunkel. My dad was a big fan. I like them too. And one of my favourites is the combination of Silent Night with the 7 o'clock news. In one ear you have Silent Night, Holy Night, all is calm, all is bright. And in the other ear you hear the more familiar news that we hear every day, the 7 o'clock headline news that permeates and prevails in the world. And the news reporter gets louder and louder throughout the song, and the carol just fades and fades until only one news, the bad news or the darkness, prevails, and the good news is completely drowned out. But John writes, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has never overcome it." The darkness has not engulfed or swallowed up that light. I mentioned that this year I took the extra step of putting up some fairy lights outside, a long string of LEDs, and I imagine that the torch app on my phone is probably more powerful, it gives out more light, but the fairy lights, they're enough. They're clearly visible, because even the faintest of lights can be seen in the dark. In fact, the greater the darkness, the clearer the light will become. Darkness cannot overcome light. It can't snuff it out. It's the other way around. The light pierces through the darkness, and the darkness is powerless against it. The glory of the light shining in the darkness is what makes Christmas light shows so attractive. I plan to do a little tour, as usual. At least I'll drop in to see Pat and his light show. Everyone can appreciate whether a Christmas light display or a laser light show or a fireworks display, that looking out maybe even as well at night time and seeing a lighthouse guiding ships at sea, that when we see that light shining in the darkness, in the clear darkness, that it is hard not to be impressed or to be drawn to that light. But John goes on to explain in the next few lines, verses 9 to 11 that we heard, that even though God's light was clearly shining into the darkness of this world, giving light and guidance to people's hearts, the people did not recognize that light. People debate and argue all day long about where we get our sense of morality from, don't they? Why do human beings have a sense of right and wrong? Where do we get that light from? Of course, we get it from our parents, fair enough, but where do they get it from? Is it, as Richard Dawkins argues, just some more pleasant side effect of evolution, where we have evolved or developed over millennia this mental programming to instinctively help others just so that we will selfishly be helped ourselves? Well, that can't be. That's totally backwards for a start. Only in a world where people have enough of God's light to already accept and understand and appreciate the value of kindness and goodness and compassion, only in that kind of a world is it possible to trade or manipulate through kindness or goodness or compassion. If someone has no appreciation for kindness, they cannot be manipulated by kindness, obviously. Right from the very beginning, God created us and shone his light into the world, spoke his word into your lives. It comes from the very source of light to show us that there is such a thing as pure and true light and goodness and justice and morality, and it all comes from him. But people deny, and they always have, and they always will, the true source of that light. As John writes, people did not recognize the light for what it was or the source of that light. Jesus was born as a human being into the world which he himself had created and to creatures which he had given light to, and they did not recognize him. We know the Christmas story. 2,000 years ago, Jesus was born as a baby into this world to be its light, to guide us, to teach us, to show us the very perfect, loving, compassionate, just character of God. And more than that, as God in the flesh, to bear the weight of all our corruption and brokenness and sickness, our sin, to take it to the cross and then to the grave, to leave it there and to rise up to give new life for everyone who would believe. From the outset, there was no room at the inn, right to the end where he was rejected and crucified between two violent criminals. That was then. But now, are we really any different? If you were to continue reading through the Gospel according to St. John, a couple of pages in, you would read the words of Jesus. People love darkness instead of light because they're evil. Oh yeah, a few Christmas lights are nice. Even the thought that Jesus is the light of the world, born to identify with all of our brokenness, that's a beautiful thought. But when that same light starts exposing areas of darkness in my heart, well, that's not just so comfortable, is it? Maybe I don't want to change. You know, Jesus, thanks for the feedback, but I don't really need your advice. I don't really need any more light in my life. There's a comfortable level that covers a multitude of sins. But to quote again from Isaiah, the prophet 700 years before Jesus, whom we heard from earlier, he speaks the truth about human nature that is just as relevant today. He says, like the blind, we grope along the wall, feeling our way like people without eyes. Without the light of Christ, we're blind. We're lost. We can't even see ourselves clearly enough, never mind seeing the right way to go. Our prayer for you this Christmas is that you won't stay blind if you are blind. That you will come out of the darkness and into the light of Christ. That his light, his truth, his word will shine into your heart. Cause you to bend the knee in adoration for Jesus, surrendering your life and all of your will to him, seeking his forgiveness, his life, his direction for your life and your future. Amen. If you'd like to know more about Jesus, the light of the world, I can drop you or post you a gospel that you can read for yourself. That's the best place to start. Read for yourself, learn about Jesus for yourself, and receive his transforming and saving light into your life. So from myself, Paul McFarland, from all of us at Youghal Baptist Church, we wish you the most Merry Christmas and a safe and joyful New Year. Take care and God bless.